Welcome. We may as well kick off. Happy St. Patrick's Day. That was our ode to St. Patrick's Day. Glad to have you along for this session. I am joined. Oops, my screens have gone a bit crazy here. Let me just get my screen sorted out. Hold on, give me 1 minute. I had two things going on. This is better. Right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day if you are that way inclined. Happy Wednesday if not. I'm Kane Sims, and I'm joined today by an esteemed, lovely panel of guests. We have Dr. Eddy Sue, co-founder of Polyai. Eddy, welcome.
Hello.
How do? We have Daniela Gerz of Polyai also. Daniela, welcome.
Hello.
And the person who you have also been hearing talking about St. Patrick's Day, who isn't yet inebriated by overzealous drinking just yet. It's probably maybe a bit later on, but perhaps not. But it is Jason Misium of Polyai as well. Welcome.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about multilingual voice assistants and how do you create them? Why do you need to create them? And the value of doing so. And we're going to see maybe even a demo as well a bit later on, which I'm excited about. No pressure, Eddy, but definitely excited about it. I have had a preview. It is very impressive. So there is a few challenges that exist when it comes to doing this, which we're going to get into. We're going to cover quite a bit of ground in quite a short period of time. Really, what we're going to talk about is the landscape, why it's important, why it's needed for multilingual assistance, and Jason will take us through that. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that exist, technical challenges that exist to actually implement this kind of stuff. There's not actually that many systems that will allow you to do this, and you'll see, and we'll get into how brands across the globe are having multiple systems all trying to do pieces of this kind of stuff. And so we'll be discussing some of those challenges. But we look at the architecture of a multilingual voice assistant and the approach to both speech recognition and natural language understanding, which is going to be incredibly interesting, as well as how to deploy this kind of stuff in less than a week. And there's some pretty impressive numbers in here as well about how even just after the course of 1 week, you can see some real measurable improvements, even improving on the already decent base level of functionality that we're seeing as well. If you do have any questions throughout, there is a Q&A function in Zoom. So please feel free to stick them in there, stick any questions in there. We will probably save them till the end. If they're really relevant, we can do them quickly. We might do them kind of as we go. So do keep them coming through and keep them alive. And we will get through them as we can. So without further ado, Jason, I'll turn it over to you. So we're going to first of all kick off a little bit about really what's the landscape at the moment, and what are the kind of the reasons why this kind of thing, multilingual voice assistants, why is it so important right now?
Great question, and it's something we discuss a lot with a lot of our partners, because we work with partners all over the place, in Europe, in East Asia, in the Americas. So the number one that comes up is growth. I would estimate that 80% of growth kind of across all of the industry verticals we see are either in new customers in their existing geographies, but who are non-native language speakers, or they're in a new geography. They're moving into a new country, and they're trying to attract customers there. The second is it's very important for inclusivity. A lot of companies right now struggle with providing customer service for anything but the native language at the same level. So this is, in the US, for example, this is, primarily English-speaking, customer service, but you have an enormous number of like Spanish-speaking customers who are then forced into English channels and then have a low kind of customer satisfaction score as a result. The other one is dialects and accents. That's a big challenge that is usually too small to address with its own team. A third is localization. A lot of companies solve this by building kind of siloed vertical teams within each geography or for each customer segment. And then suddenly you have a consistency problem. Each org is trying to address customer needs in their own way. Fourth, and this is a really big one, is cost. Especially for larger orgs that have a customer base that is fairly multilingual, it is extremely expensive to hire and train a customer care team, on the same metrics in multiple languages. And it's very risky because all the challenges of doing customer care in one language are now multiplied across all the different languages. And then finally, the current tech in automating this isn't working. Essentially, what everyone does is you just rebuild it from scratch. You're building a voice AI model in whatever languages you're trying to serve, and the way you know that that's not working is because essentially nobody does this. It's incredibly difficult to do that, to have a team that can do that in multiple languages simultaneously.
You've got a lot of things at play there, haven't you? I mean, one is designing a consistent experience, as you kind of alluded to with that locally led kind of implementation. Like, how do you not just do it technically, but make sure that the experience that you're getting across in one locale is kind of consistent in another locale, and not having different conversational patterns and all that kind of stuff at play. And then the technology one is an interesting one. I'm aware of quite a number of companies, large companies, big payment providers, telcos, even car manufacturers, that they've had to not just have different kind of NLU models and technical models for different locales, they've actually had to use completely different providers. And so there is a total difference in terms of, like, they're just out of sync. Two completely independent systems operating across two geographies. And it feels a little bit like some organizations, and if you're tuning in, if you haven't implemented this yet, this is probably one of the things that to pay attention to, is that most organizations, when you kind of start doing something, you just start with what's in front of you. But then whenever it kind of carries on going forward, and all of a sudden in 5 years' time, you've got one CRM in France and another CRM in the US, and you've got one payment provider in Mexico and another payment provider in Japan. And it's like, you end up having sporadic systems all over the place. And I think the difference, or the unique time that we're in now, is that because you don't have a 15-year-old legacy chatbot platform, you're pretty much starting from scratch. And so if you want to start from scratch, right, you're kind of better off starting in the right place, with the right kind of foundations. So yeah, definitely that's good stuff. But I mean, it all sounds nice and simple when we kind of say it like that. But Eddy, tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that are typically faced when you try and do this kind of stuff.
Sure. So Ken, I think you definitely mentioned a very important point, right? Because lots of the systems that has been built were centered on English itself, because English is one of the prominent languages in the world, and lots of voice conversational system were actually built on top of that, right? So it's I should say, like, if maybe in the next 2-3 years our main focus is English, then of course we're gonna focus to make English bot as good as possible, but not put in too much effort on the other languages. But if you look into a longer horizon, like when you actually want to apply this language into all the other 10 or even 20 different languages, this is a problem. Right. So like from this aspect, that you definitely want to take into account the multilingual application from day one. And the second point here is, again, like, because English is actually quite a prominent language, so you can easily get like such data online or from whatever resources, right? As opposed to a rather lower resource languages where you don't really have enough data to train each individual modules there. Right, so that's another very big problem of like switching, like expanding from the English to other languages. And of course, in a voice conversational scenario, people tend to have different dialect or different accent, right? So for example, I'm not a native English speaker, so I definitely have my own accents. So sometimes I might pronounce it weirdly in some certain sentences or certain like words. That in that case, the bot also needs to some extent pick up those slightly weird accents or weird variation, right? And so in this case, it's oftentimes we call it a speech recognition errors. And of course, last but not least, right? If you want to, like, yes, you can build an English system, and then in the next year you can build a German or even a French system. But if they don't really share a lot of common architecture together, if they are all standard on one, it's actually quite hard, right? Because sometimes you actually want to change one major behavior of your central bot. And this one, ideally, it needs to be applied to lots of different language application there. And if you set up them separately, then you need to, of course, modify them separately. So that's another big hiccup over there. right? So yes, next slide, please. So from Polyai's perspective, from our own expertise, like, Polyai, actually, the name of Polyai is actually from polyglot, which is, a person who can speak a lot of different languages, right? So we already have this kind of multilingual application mindset in our mind from day one, right? Because that's mainly because we actually started from a lot of like top researchers in the company, like Nicola Mrksic, our CEO, and Ivan Volic. These are all top researchers in multilingual applications back in the academic world. So of course, like based on these starting point, we already took this in mind, right? So if you think about a very big, very high level on how a conversational turn looks like this is actually one very high level pipeline. A person input a voice and to a language understanding module, and this module supposedly it should pick up the intent or whatever you talk about in the semantic level. And after it pick up this intent that you want to talk about, it will need to determine what to talk back to you, right? And ideally, like as you can see, two colors over here, the natural language understanding part, it definitely is language dependent, right? It needs to understand your own language, and then you map to a particular intention of what you talk about. And everything after that, it should be language independent. Language independent as in, as what I mean, like the behavior of like coming back to you should be pretty much the same while maintaining some small flexibility, right? So on top of that, next slide, please.
So just to confirm there, then, just before we to confirm, what we're seeing here is that the NLU needs to be language dependent, because obviously there's nuances with different languages, different geographies, even potentially different dialects within a locale or an accent. Exactly. But what you're saying is that once you've recognized the accent, you've recognized the intent, the essentially the logic of the conversation should be consistent. So for example, if someone says hello in Japanese or Spanish or Portuguese, that needs to be picked up by the correct language dependent NLU. Yes. But the response that comes back, which might be, hi, how can I help you, needs to be consistent throughout. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, totally. So like again, yeah, that's a very good understanding. So keeping track of the input language and reply back to this particular language is basically handled by the former point, and all the underlying logic or behavior of what to ask or talk about next it should be language independent.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So
yes, please.
There's a bit before that then, which we've got here, which is before you feed the NLU with a language, you need to be able to understand, first of all, what language that kind of is, which is where the speech recognition side comes in. So talk us through that side of things, that on the speech recognition and listening out for different languages and how that works.
Sure. So yes, if you actually break down the previous slide into a more fine-grained like details, these are what we view the best pipeline should look like, right? So again, like voice in whatever different native language is pretty much like mapping from a waveform to a sentence in your own language, right? So of course, like in order to achieve this, you need to have like a ASR, automatic speech recognizer, in different languages. And of course, like, or be able to recognize like different languages on the fly, right? So and afterwards, yeah, so I'll definitely talk about how we tackle the problems and make the performance of the ASR speech recognizer as good as possible later. And after we got these different sentences in different languages, right? Of course, as I mentioned previously, we definitely want to map them to a intent that this person is talking about. Right. So this is another very interesting point. So we managed to build our own multilingual understanding module to try to map from whatever language, as you can see here. I can now log in my account, or 我不能登录我的账号 in Chinese, into a dot, a point in this high dimensional intent space, right? So in this space, just imagine there's a big space where ideally languages or sentences talking about the same intent should be mapped very similar to each other, very close to each other, right? While the other ones, for example, like this yellow sentence speaking in Spanish, it's actually talking about the credit limit questions or whatsoever. Like this is, like this, the yellow one, supposedly it should be like way far than the distance between the red and the blue one, right? So having this like canvas, having this space of this intent like recognition that we talk about, this can actually help us to address the following policy, the following conversational flow design in a language independent way, right? So, and of course, like after we determine that, we can talk back to the user in the voice, in your own language, etc. Which is determined by the purple module over here in the former part, right? So yes.
So this might get at a question that Dax has asked. Actually, I asked him to clarify the question, but I think this is it. Everything on the left-hand side is language dependent. Speech recognition needs to pick up the language that's being spoken, feed that into the NLU to classify the correct intent. But the architecture side of things, the back-end side of things, you touched on it earlier, but just to confirm, that back-end side of the logic and the architecture behind the scenes is language independent.
Yes, which is super important, right? Because like if you think about the application of our bot, if we work with let's say a contact center, like fundamentally they don't care, and they also don't need to know how we determine the language for them, right? Or how we recognize the language, how we recognize the intent. They mainly care about the performance over there, right? But most importantly, they do care about the flow, how the entire flow goes, right? Because from the contact center's perspective, they do have their own recipe for real human representative when they are answering a phone call or talk to their customer, right? So being able to modify these flow and also easily applicable to different languages, this is actually super important. So from our perspective, making it language independent is also a very it has a good advantage of achieving this purpose here.
Interesting. So the response that comes back,
yes,
given that the logic is language independent, how do you ensure that the response that goes back to the user is in that same language that it came in at?
Sure. So because from in the purple part, we already determined the language there, right? So this information will be kept during the entire conversation. So of course, when I reply back to you, it can go ahead to point to this particular language and talk back to you and try to map from that particular sentence in that language, or even that like recordings or TTS. Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah. So that follow up, Kane, your question in the beginning about how we address the automatic speech recognizer, right? So of course, this is a very, very hard problem, and as especially when we actually are talking about voice scenario, because voice conversational like use case can happen anywhere, right? For example, like at the moment, yes, fortunately we're in a very quiet like environment. But if I am, in the tube, or if I am having a very bad signal in my own, like with my own cell phone, that will definitely introduce a lot of like unexpected problem over there, right? And let alone the accent, the slangs, or whatever like human error that might cause, right? So as a conversational company, we don't want to tie our like speech recognizer solution just to one of them, right? And so here, as you can see in the middle layer, we are actually exploring different kind of ASR models and try to make the best of all worlds, right? And of course, there are lots, as we mentioned, as we know that there are lots of unexpected situations that might happen. This person might just be silent, or this person might just talk about random topic, but not focus on booking restaurant scenario, right? So here we are adding some other functionality, other information. As you can see that embeds this selection, we don't just keep the top prediction, but also make it the best use of like multiple outcome. And also in some scenario, like on the top right-hand side, biasing, because for example, like for certain application, maybe they have their own product names, right? So in order to like pick up these product name much easier, we can find a way to input this as one of the bias term. etc. So again, like having all these come together, these help us to achieve a better recognition models for different languages itself.
How much kind of sort of effort does that take to do? Like if a client said to you tomorrow, let's turn this on, let's do it. How much effort is involved in doing that kind of tuning and getting all of these kind of different ASR models set up and in place and stuff like that?
That's a very good question. So, so this, for some, for the, when we want to pick up some certain terms of this particular application, this really, we really need to get information from the client itself, right? And so ideally, if the client do have a list of specific terms they have for their use case, for example, the product names, etc., or a specific hotel name, for example, like they can definitely give it to us, and we can put in our system to make it much easily recognize these terms. Otherwise, we will be pretty much doing a iterative way with our client, right? Where we deploy our default ASR in that language for our clients, and during POC, during deployment phase, we do try to iterate this as fast as possible, and in order to like level up the performance of it.
Cool. Nice. Well, that covers some stuff on the speech recognition side. We've mentioned, and Eddy, you mentioned there that whatever comes in the speech recognition, you need to recognize the language, and then there is the NLU that takes place. And so, Daniela, talk us through a little bit about the NLU side of things and how that works.
Sure. So on the NLU side, we have a compact model that's trained on large amounts of data. So amongst others, we train on 3.7 billion of Reddit comments. And if you know Reddit, it's very noisy. There's slang and informal language. So that's very good for our model to learn from. And it's also multilingual in parts. So, and this model actually produces the leading results on the market. We have several publications on this topic. So if you want to take a look, they're linked in the slide. And basically, so this model has a very common sense of language usage, which we can make use of in our applications. So there are two settings here that I want to talk you through. So out of the box means that with just minimal data, we can already reach a good performance in a POC with just given the client requirements. And then as the model is deployed and we can learn from actual client data, the performance is growing. So if you go on the next slide, we have some numbers. So if you look on the right, we're currently working on a publication that we expect to finish in Q2. And this is one of the results. In that, in the out-of-the-box setting, so with just minimal data given the requirements, we already get an accuracy of like 80 to 90% for intent capture. And then 2 weeks in, it goes into the 90s, so it gets very, very good performance. And this is in a realistic banking virtual assistant with 80 plus intents, and it's on voice. So so the key points here is that our model is very compact and has a common sense of language usage, and we can iterate very quickly.
And so what we're seeing here then is the technology. What you do first is go live with something that has, by the looks of things, above 80% intent accuracy. And then can you just talk us through a little bit about what you do as far as that gathering that training data and improving that accuracy? What's involved in doing that?
Sure. So there are basically two options. So, well, actually three options. So first, given the client requirements, we would come up with some minimal training data so our engineers would build that. And then either we can do crowdsourcing, some more data, or once the model is actually live in deployment, we would monitor what happens and then add data as required.
So you're listening essentially to things that are coming in that are showing a low kind of match score, or things that have not been recognized, and things like that, and then presumably manually reviewing those, sticking them back into the model to train it to improve the accuracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. How long does that tend to go for? I mean, this is impressive results in terms of doing that over a 2-week period and getting that accuracy well above 90%. Is this something that you advise people, given that we're talking about multilingual applications here, and so it's not just one application on on a website or on a phone line where one small team maybe is reviewing it. There's going to be a lot of different stuff coming in with multi locales, maybe it's multi geographies, all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have a lot more. It's not going to be as easy, should we say, necessarily, unless you've got the team that speak all those different languages to keep on to do that kind of improvement over time. So is this something that requires constant improvement over time, or is it something that you do in this 2-week period, you make some improvements, you get it so that there's a high enough success rate, and then that's that? Can you talk us through the general life cycle?
We do constantly improve our applications, and we do constantly monitor because we want them to be as best as they can be. And we do have a very international team, and we also have an internal dashboard that we're developing currently, which shows all sorts of metrics. So we can monitor the performance very well, even if it's in different languages. And then for specific use cases, we can look into it more. So the metrics will tell us basically where things go wrong, and then we can go more into details in that situation.
Yeah. So like our continuous improvement definitely is not gonna stop at the 2 weeks time, right? So it depends on our collaboration with the client itself. We can definitely agree with a frequent update based on the cadence between the clients.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I mean, this sounds really good. I think that there's a few things so far that we've touched on, and I know we're hopefully going to get into a bit of a demo in a second. So let's strap ourselves in for that. But before that, I think it's just worth recapping where we've come from essentially and what we've touched on so far. So Jason did a good job of explaining the landscape, the lay of the land, the need for this. And to be honest, one thing we haven't necessarily, we have touched on quite a bit, but I think it's worth emphasizing is that we're not necessarily talking here about always launching a multilingual application in different countries. That's the first thing you would think of. If you've got a brand in Spain and a brand in France and a brand in Germany, then across geographies makes sense. But, Eddy, you touched on it and Jason did as well in terms of sometimes, the UK is a perfect example. The US is a perfect example. There are populations where English isn't the first language, and you were mentioned around accents and speech recognition, having trouble, English speech recognition, having trouble picking up kind of like different accents. I have trouble myself. The amount of times I have to re-ask Siri what I actually want to do because of our accent is unreal. And so you'll still get benefit out of doing this stuff purely, even if you're just in one location, and especially if you're a large company. If you're dealing with, let's say, 7 million calls, that's not that large, but it's large enough. If you're dealing with 7 million calls a year, the long tail ends up actually having a bit of an impact. And so even if you only have, I don't know, 1% of your population that speaks Arabic, then 1% of 7 million calls is a decent amount. And so, you're not only, as I said, you're not only going across geographies, but you're able to improve the experience of people within one country as well, I think, which is really important. The other things, I think this accuracy thing and the increase in accuracy is really interesting. We do have a question around that, but I think we'll save that a little bit till later on. But I think being able to launch with something that's good enough, to be honest, I mean, the 80-20 rule is still a rule that people use. If you can do something that's good enough for 80% of people and you take the fallout on 20%, then people are usually happy. But to start out with over 80% and increase that to above 90%, I think is really good. And I liked what you were saying, Eddy, about thinking about this from day one, because there is a real danger when people are getting started. They start something and they have a system for a chatbot, and they start something else, they have another system for a voice bot, and all of a sudden it's, we need to add French, and all of a sudden it gets bigger and larger and more complex than it needs to. And so addressing it from day one, I think, is definitely a good idea. And so with that, anything else I've missed there, by the way, Jason? Anything else that you would summarize based on what we've?
No, that was great. I would jump up and down on the out of the box being the best in the market is such an enormous advantage in being able to deploy something like this and try it quickly. One of the things we see a lot is so many people come in with very ambitious ideas for, voice AI that will solve all of my problems, and then come away disappointed because they spent 6 months on it and they don't really make anything that works. And so the fact that our pre-trained models are out of the box, outperforming the rest of the market, and then just get better with the data that they accrue, really means that it takes a lot of the guesswork and the risk out of bringing something like this in. And it has really changed our ability to work with clients who have nibbled around the edges of this before, but felt like it couldn't meet what they needed. So I think that's a huge deal. I mean, every time we talk about it, it blows me away. I put that that report on on my bedroom wall. It's pretty great.
So I definitely second Jason's point here, right? Because I mean, talking about the actual performance, of course, the most important part is the accuracy, right? It needs to be good. And the second big important part is that how fast you can achieve that good performance, right? So yeah, totally here. We believe that even if you see that roughly 85% accuracy, assumed in this in this chart, it's already good enough to start with, right? But yeah, definitely we will definitely be better, if not equal, and given the new data that during the deployment in general.
Nice. Well, I think without further ado, Alexa, drum roll, please.
Okay.
Can we have a demo, Eddy?
Sure. So like a demo is always better than thousands of words. So following our presentation so far, we would definitely like to show you how it actually works, not just on the paper itself. So just to begin with, I would like to have Dan. She will be showing us the conversational voice bot in German. Yeah, since she's a German, so definitely she's the best person to talk about.
Yeah, so for this demo, what I'm going to do is it's a banking bot. So I'm going to ask it to change my address, and then it's going to verify me.
Hallo, danke, dass Sie die Polyai angerufen haben. Wie kann ich helfen?
Hallo, ich möchte gerne meine Adresse ändern.
Okay, ich kann dir dabei helfen. Was ist Ihre Postleitzahl?
Das ist die 11050.
Und der Name auf Ihrem Konto?
Der Name ist Nikola Mirksic.
Was ist Ihr Geburtsdatum?
Der 4. April 1991.
Okay. Vielen Dank. Ich habe Ihre Kontodaten. Okay. Wie lautet deine neue Postleitzahl?
Das ist die 21000.
Zur Bestätigung. Das ist 21000. Ist es richtig?
Ja.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Thank you, Dan. So pretty much that was how a voice conversation in the German actually sounds like. So in addition to that, right? So following what Kane you just talked about, in a scenario where we might be just deploying the major language here, for example, English, and sometimes there might be some Chinese speaker or Turkish speaker who might not understand English that well, right? So in that case, that it will be ideally if we can detect the language of what the user is talking about, right? So on top of the multilingual bot build-up, we also are developing a way to switch different languages. So here I'm gonna show you some example of it. 1 second.
Hi, thanks for calling East West Bank. How can I help?
¿Cómo puedo acceder a mi cuenta?
Sorry, I missed that. How can I help?
¿Cómo puedo acceder a mi cuenta?
Puede acceder a su cuenta y realizar un pago utilizando nuestra aplicación para iOS o Android.
我的网络服务从昨天就无法使用了，你可以帮我一下吗？
没问题，我可以帮您检查为什么该服务被禁用。首先，您的电话号码是多少
？Sure, my number is 0935764892.
Sorry, that didn't seem right. Please tell me the phone number on your account.
0935764892.
And the name on your account?
My name is Emmanuel Sefrin.
Finally, what's your date of birth?
我的生日是1986年11月6日。Okay, that's it. So basically, hopefully from these two demos, you pretty much grasp the essence of of how our multilingual bot can work, and pretty much as you heard that the model was able to pick up which language you are talking about, even if sometimes it didn't know what I'm talking about, it will still ask me in that particular language. Right, because it detected that particular language, right? So yes, happy to answer any more questions on top of the demo itself, but that's it.
Wow, I don't know what's more impressive, the technology being able to recognize the language that you speak, or you being able to speak about 9 different languages.
Yeah, we have a lot of polyglot in company.
Yeah, sometimes I struggle to speak English some days. That is fantastic. I'm sure we'll have some questions about that. I've got a couple of questions about that, but we'll save that till the end. We'll get to the questions in 5 minutes or so. But first, there must be some secret sauce going on here. Here we go. And I don't know how much you can divulge of this secret sauce, but give us a little bit of an insight into what's involved in that and what a deployment looks like.
Sure. So like conversational AI is actually a very, very big composite modular system, right? So it definitely one small problems occurred in upstream model, it will definitely just like break the entire system. So here, like, you definitely needs to know well enough on how individual system work, instead of just plug in whatever ASR, whatever understanding module, right? So first of all, as we mentioned in one of the slides there, you definitely need to have a very strong know-how on how to use or how to build ASR, speech recognizer on your own, right? Because in that case, as I mentioned there, voice scenario is way harder than just text, right? Because text, yes, the bot just needs to input whatever you type in and try to parse some values or try to understand the intent over there. But for voice, as what you heard from our scenario, sometimes I just murmur, I didn't pronounce it well enough, or there might be some accent and it just didn't understand. It needs to have a way to recover from that, right? Either on the conversational way, or on the ASR biasing, etc., right? So that's kind of like the first point. And follow up, a robust understanding module is also a must, right? So here, like machine learning or AI, generally we talk about model and data itself, right? And model, yes, like we can build a good model, that's fine. But for data, like people always talk about high quality data, and you can achieve a good performance. And interestingly, high quality data for voice conversational scenario is actually very noisy data, a set of noisy data, right? So noisy in the sense of where hopefully we can incorporate lots of slangs, lots of informal way of what user talk about, and of course, the most important here, like it needs to be multilingual in order to support the multilingual application we just showed, right? Because here again, like because it's noisy, so that means that it is very realistic and it reflects lots of voice scenarios. It actually happens in real life. Right. So basically, on the next step is what we talk about, the language independent policy. Right. So we believe that having the conversational behavior separated from the understanding module can achieve lots of benefit. Because as a multinational enterprise, maybe I want to deploy my bot to 5 different countries with maybe 6, 7, 8 different languages within. I mean, what I care about is the majority of the flow should be pretty much the same, right? Welcome to blah blah bank, welcome to blah blah telecom, welcome to blah blah hotel, right? Like these should be pretty much the same behavior, but also we want to be able to customize a little bit for your own languages, right? Because for some certain country, some languages might be just be very concise, right? Like German, but for some different countries, there maybe this particular term, this particular sentence, people tend to break them down into 2 like consequential terms, right? So in that case, we need to also be able to like merge or break them down together. So that's another very important aspect. Make it majority of them the same, but make it flexible, right? And also, most importantly, like if I can jump to the last point first, like the model is learned from real conversation, Reddit data, whatever online forum data. As long as you see a person replying another person's original statement, it is a conversation. Either it's a one turn, it's a multiple turn dialogue, right? So having those, our model will be able to pick up in order to infer what the original person is talking about, in order to pick up the actual semantics this person is talking about, right? And another practical, interesting point we would like to stress is, oftentimes when we are working with some clients, where no matter whether they are technical, they are non-technical, they will always ask us, okay, what do we need to provide you, right? And like from our aspect, the only thing we need is just a list of intent or a list of questions your user might ask about, right? And of course, like we believe that you do want the bot to behave in a certain way, like your human agent, right? So a general conversational flow will be also very, very suitable, very useful for us to build a bot that can talk similarly with like to your human agent. And another bonus point is, we don't really need any recording data or past data from you, because we are not using those data to train our model. Again, our model already is learned to know the common sense of how to use the language easily. So effectively, yeah, that's pretty much all the secret sauce that we can provide in this presentation.
Nice, wicked. Well, that might answer a couple of questions that have come through, but I think we'll go through them anyway. We've got a few questions come through. I've got a few questions myself, to be honest, as we've been going through. So we'll see how far we get in the next 15 minutes. But before maybe I'll start with one of mine first before we get into these, which is from a design perspective. What's the best practice for letting the caller or the user know that this actually is a multilingual bot with multilingual capabilities? Like, what's the best way of communicating that? Because if I call somewhere and the answer's in English, it says, "Hi, welcome to Tesco's. How can I help?" What's the best practice to let people know that, hey, you can just speak in any language you want to here?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I believe that lots of the existing IVR system, or actually some system, are already implemented this, right? So think about the traditional way. Like if you want to talk in English, press 1. If you want to talk in German, press 2, etc. Right? And of course, that is not ideal, because that will require the user to put down their iPhone or whatsoever phone and press 1 or 2, right? Instead of just talk over the phone, right? So from our advice, we would say, again, this might be empirical, right? But also depends on our clients' the request or their preference. But one simple way is we can just easily say that, okay, welcome to Poly Bank. Right, I can talk to you in English, Chinese, and Spanish, right, and just speak whatever you like, and we will try to answer you as much as possible, right? So having an implicit or explicit hint to tell the caller that you are actually able to handle these languages, this will be a very easy and straightforward way to start with, right? And because I don't think that you want to surprise your customer on randomly talk to them in Spanish or Korean while they only know English, right? I think that this kind of surprise is not ideal. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. A question which you kind of alluded to, but I think it's worth clarifying. A question from Tina: what do you do so that your model can learn from real conversations, and does the client need to supply any of that? So you mentioned that you train the models on Reddit data, and so you've got robust models in the first place. But then you also mentioned tuning speech recognition systems and things like that. So to what degree do clients need to provide some form of training data?
That's a very good question. As what Jason said, as what we show in our the bar performance over there, we don't really need your conversational data, because our bot already knows the common usage of how we talk. Right, just imagine, just take an analogy, right? Our bot is more like it's like a 10-year-old boy who can talk to you in whatever topic in a very conversational way. It sometimes even know how to reply to you in an emoji way, or like or even some slangs, right? In the language that you're interested in. And in order to make this 10-year-old like boy to understand and talk in your own domain, in your own language, it's more like you as a teacher, you as our customer, provide your domain data to us, right? So again, these domain data are more like, for example, as I mentioned, a list of like a specific product name, and also like specific flow you would like this boy to talk about, right? So having all these information from you, having all these domain like domain knowledge from you to us, we can train this 10-year-old boy to be a, let's say, 20-year-old like medical doctor to talk to your medical domain conversation, or even a receptionist to, you know, to handle lots of hospitality related conversation, right? So again, like having our own in-house conversational model already built, we are easily able to adapt to your own domain knowledge and make a conversation.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, what's happening is you don't really need to provide anything you don't already have. I think one problem that comes up when people are deploying these kinds of systems is this idea of, oh, we have to go get reams of, you know, audio data and clean calls and well-labeled stuff. And you probably already have what we would need, which is usually, like Eddy said earlier, like, what do you tell your human customer care agents to say? You know, like what are the things they have to respond to? Oh, you already have that list somewhere. So normally, you know, that's what we use. You know, we did a deployment that I remember, you know, one of our PMs showed us where, you know, they basically just wrote, it was almost like, you know, the back of a bar napkin. You know, it's like, all right, here are the 20 things that we got to do. And that's it. And so it's whatever information you already have for how you imagine the customer journey should go is what we'll use, and we'll build it from there. There's nothing special or new that's required.
This one might be one for you, Daniela, which is around the NLU accuracy. This is a question from Dennis. Is there a limit to the accuracy? Is there a kind of like a ceiling at a certain percentage, or is 100% feasible? Where does the ceiling, and where do you think is good enough?
So there isn't really a ceiling, I would say. It gets better over time, because as we get more data, we cover more of the things that people actually say. So of course it can happen that after a while a customer will say something that we haven't covered yet, or that the model doesn't cover yet, but usually it gets more accurate over time.
Yeah. So on top of that, I think, like, you know, just like us human, right? You know, like I cannot guarantee that I understand 100% of what you talk about, right? So actually, this actually brings up to another interesting point, which we didn't really cover. So you know, normally the best way for our bot is to work with your customer service representative, right? You know, having our bot to serve as a tier 1 agent to answer most of the incoming call. And yes, just like me, right? If you ask me about machine learning, conversational AI, I can answer you 100%. If you ask me about medical issue, I need to go to consult my wife, right? So like bot needs to be behaved like this way, right? So here, like how to gracefully tell the user that, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just, you know, like redirecting you to a call center agent, right? Being able to do this is actually another very important aspect, together with the higher accuracy that we can provide.
Nice. A really good question from Anna is, how do you define success with customers? Like, is it around quality, accuracy? What does success look like for a deployment like this?
So different aspect, right? So because conversational AI is a conversation is a like full package, right? If you look into a fine grain measurement, then of course how to accurately pick up what you talk about in a single turn. This is the one metric to do it, right? But if you look at in a very holistic way, this is actually case by case, depends on what our client wants. Right, because for example, it's more like a containment rate, right? Like what is the percentage of the bot being able to single-handed handle the incoming calls instead of like handing off to a human being, right? You know, maybe if we want to achieve like 40% containment rate or even 60, this again depends, right? And so again, like these are all quite customized and case by case, but happy to answer more on that front if you do have any specific use case in mind.
Yeah, I think our clients, the partners that we work with, they tend to define what success is. Like we're basically coming in and saying, what are you trying to achieve on this call? Is it that you're trying to complete an order? Is it that you're trying to answer a question? Is that you're just trying to help them navigate something? And depending on that, we build to that essentially. So like Eddy said, within the individual, what the AI is being measured on in an individual turn and an individual interaction is, did it get that correct? Did it hear what you said and understand that correctly? But beyond that, like the broader success, a lot of that is in our partners' hands. So we work with them on each case to make sure we achieve those together.
Yes.
Interesting. An interesting question, which I don't know how often this would actually come up in reality. Maybe it's just something that is curious about. I think question from Andy. Curious about whether the model can deal with code switching. Like maybe someone starts out speaking in English and then wraps up speaking in Spanish. I know I can say some funky things, but it doesn't quite traverse different languages. But in a hypothetical situation, is that something that this thing would be able to deal with?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, right? Because for some, especially for some like non-English speaking countries like Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Singapore, lots of we speak Chinese and English like we switch these kind of like terms term by term. So for example, like we don't really have any some specific terms in Chinese for that like for this machine learning term, then we'll definitely say it in English, right? So to answer this, at the moment there is no best code switching model, I would say. Right, even if you see like online, like from the market, I don't think the technology is like good enough, right? So in order to achieve this, yes, I mean for our model, we definitely have a way to handle code switching, but as in whether it actually is working like 100% well, like for a real use case, this is again case by case, because this is a way more like harder problem, and also like the use case is like quite rare from what we see so far.
And second to last question, perhaps, again, just one of interest, really. So you mentioned Reddit a few times in terms of using Reddit for training data. And I know that, GPT-3 has used Reddit for training data. And if people aren't aware of that, it's OpenAI's NLU system, which for all intents and purposes seems really good. And so there must be some decency to the data quality that's in there, which might explain some of the accuracy levels that you were talking about. Question from Timothy is, do you have to mitigate against like offensive and inappropriate language and any kind of biases or anything like that with Reddit data?
So, super interesting question. I think that the main difference is that so you need to understand that this is inappropriate or offensive language, right? You need to understand it, right? But the most important part, you cannot say it out loud, right? If when it comes to inappropriate or racist or like offensive one, right? So if you look at what we the entire pipeline that we have, like we mainly use these data to train an understanding model, right? So again, we have a very the reason why we have these very good model that can understand whatever stands noisy or even these inappropriate languages is because of Reddit data, right? But when it comes to the bot replying the sentence back to you, this is fully designed by us with the bot, right? Like you as a client with us, you determine what the bot needs to talk about, right? So in this way, we can fully bypass the problem of the bot randomly spit out a racist or inappropriate sentence there.
Interesting. Last question then, where can people try this out? Is this a platform that they can go and use? Is this a service that they can get involved in? What's the best way if someone's sitting there right now and thinking I'm lapping up every minute of this is me, how do I that's Jason, how do I get involved? What do I do next? What's the next steps?
Yeah, sure. So
you find me.
Yes, please.
Go and find
Jason.
No,
come find me. That's the easiest. Yeah, that's probably the easiest answer. Slide into my DMs. That's the answer.
But in addition to that, right? So we are also building our own the platform, right? So like Polyai Platform, which can enable our customer to go ahead to customize your own use case, right? So for example, like the language understanding part and the policy part. Policy part, of course, we want to be able to let you design the flow you want with us or on your own, right? That's the goal, right? And on the other hand, for the language understanding part, as what we mentioned, you don't need to handle all the weird like out of domain use case or silence use case. We handle that everything for you. The only thing you need to input there is, again, the domain knowledge, right? Specific terms or specific like slangs you would like our bot to pick up, right? And for that front, yeah, we believe that having this like a platform, a UI to show to you, or is the one of the way to achieve that. But of course, like we also offer a fully custom service for you, where you don't need to handle this on call.
Yeah. That sounds good. So there's a platform coming. In the meantime, polyai.com. Thank you for joining us. If you are interested in, this has kind of turned into a little bit of a semi-interview. If you do like this kind of style of interview and you do like listening to the ins and outs of conversational AI best practice, then please do check out the VUX World podcast. We had Nicola Merksic on there last week, I think it was, from Polyai, talking about superhuman voice assistants and how to create them, multilinguality being a part of that, but there's a hell of a lot more to it if you want to check that out. And we have interviews with thought leaders similar to Daniela, Eddy, and Jason every single week. So please do check that out. In the meantime, don't forget, head to polyai.com if you're interested in this stuff. Thank you, Daniela and Eddy and Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if I wasn't not drinking during the week as part of my health kick, I would definitely be going to have a beer to celebrate St. Paddy's Day. So I hope you all are as well. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kane. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.